Welcome to the HResource podcast. HResource with David, Lord and guests. They love talking about people, but in a good way.
You know, I knew I wanted to be on the radio from a very, very, very early age, but I also knew that I wasn't a boy. I was always told from a very early age that you can't be on the radio. You can't. You know, that you're from a working class council estate in Barnsley. First song was Jukebox Jive by the Rubettes, followed by Billy Ray Cyrus and Achy Breaky Heart.
Okay.
Who I introduced as Billy Ray Cypress. And I'd got a guest on next. I played one record after the 2:30 news, and it's something like 2:36, I started talking, and I didn't finish talking until the 3 o'clock news. And my teeth were chattering, and I was shivering because I was so afraid. What was, you know, would they get up and walk out? Would I lose them? David, I was terrified. 7 years ago today that I did this interview on BBC 5 Live with the wonderful broadcaster Stephen Nolan when I announced that I was transitioning. I found my groove. This is it. And that, David, that was like winning life's lottery. That was the best thing in the world. Anyone that tells me I can't, I'll bloody well will.
Yeah.
And I'll try so hard. If it takes me years to do it, I will get there eventually. I walked on stage, and as standing ovations go, they clapped and clapped and clapped and clapped and didn't stop.
That's incredible.
The whole, and I can't tell you what that did. That
I can
filled
only
me
imagine.
with
I'm getting a bit
so much
goosey
love.
as you're telling me the story, because that's...
Yeah, just the entire industry. The love and support I've had from my industry is just incredible. Incredible.
Today's guest is Stephanie Hirst. Her story is quite incredible, quite remarkable, and inspirational. This is somebody who personifies the meaning of the word passion. Not only has the career that Stephanie followed been one that she has coveted from very, very early age, starting before she was a teenager, to be working in an area of which she had got and grown a love for. Developed an incredibly strong career, award-winning, millions of listeners to her radio shows, known throughout the industry for professionalism, broadcaster, presenter on both radio and TV, podcaster, writer, coach, and noted public speaker. The date of the recording of this podcast coincided with a milestone event in Stephanie's life, and I was honoured that we were able to share that day, celebrating the life, the journey, and the experiences that she's encountered along the way. So what I would like to say is happy birthday, Stephanie, and thank you for this wonderful podcast. I'm delighted today to welcome to the HResource podcast one Stephanie Hirst. Stephanie will be a very, very familiar voice and face to those that have seen her present. Quite a career, incredibly well-known broadcaster, presenter, public speaker, writer, podcaster, an award-winning character that I am honoured to have on the podcast today. Welcome, Stephanie.
David, thank you very much for allowing me on the incredible podcast that you have created. It's an incredible listen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We can, there's a joint love-in going on right now.
Yes.
Talking about love-ins, what about this series 3? We're talking about passion. And we had previously, the first episode was Gamal Tuara, G. And G very kindly suggested, when he knew what this was all about, that you would make a very, very good guest. Now, I was already aware of you, but when I started to look into a bit more of your background, I thought, wow, this is going to be a very, very interesting podcast, and unlike any other that I've done before, which is always what we look for. So I'd like to ask you, it's about passion. So what does passion mean to Stephanie Hirst?
Oh, gosh.
It's a good question to start
passion.
with.
Yeah, it's a really good question. As a broadcaster, and actually, do you know what? Broadcaster is a too grand a word. Let's just get to basics here. I'm a radio geek. I've been a radio geek since I was little. Yeah, I'm a fully fledged geek because, and I've said this recently in a few interviews, I think radio is one of your first freedoms in life, because when you get your first bike, you can go to the end of your street and then you get a little more confident, and then you go to the street ahead and you feel like you've gone on holiday. And radio is a little bit like that, because you can go on holiday with your radio, and I don't mean physically leaving your house, but you could, listen to the World Service, or you could tune around late at night and hear all of these stations from different corners of the globe if the atmospherics were really good at night. It was just, it was incredible. This radio, which is across from me, actually, it's on my windowsill, and recently retrieved from the parents' loft.
Oh, I wish I'd kept my own radio.
Yeah, it's the one my first one I got when I was 7 years old, and I'm looking at it now, and I used to literally tune around the dial, and this thing just, I was addicted to it. We went on holiday, the amount of batteries I went through, because there used to be, the great big fat ones.
Yeah.
I was always asking for batteries. We could never afford Duracells. They were always really, the low budget ones that didn't last longer than a day, because we didn't have much money at all. I'm from a northern working class council estate in Barnsley in the north of England, and we didn't particularly have much money at all. There was only my dad that was working. My mum was a housewife. My mum eventually did go back out to work when I was about 12, 13, when she'd, as she put it, "I've raised you now. I'm going out to work. Don't burn the house down."
Yeah. That's what it would be like back in the day. I mean, I'm somewhat older than you, but yeah, I remember actually that you brought me right back in my memories talking about that, tuning in under the covers. There's a couple of things I used to listen to, which probably says an awful lot more about me.
Luxembourg?
Yes. Radio 208. Absolutely. Yeah. Luxembourg was one, actually, so it's three. I used to listen to the American Forces Network radio.
AFN. Yeah.
And I'd listen to the live broadcast on a Sunday of the football. They bring a sort of a Sunday night football game through. So I'd listen to, get this, I had no idea what was going on, but I was incredibly captivated by these American accents. Live sporting events that were happening when I really should be asleep. Under the covers. And the other thing was Harry Carpenter commentating on boxing.
Magical.
I mean, and I loved it. I was captivated by it. So I completely get that.
And that is, I think, hearing, AFN and the late, great Harry Carpenter. That's theatre of the mind. You can't see the pictures, but from what Harry is describing, and that's how good he was as a commentator, that just creates pictures in your mind. And that's I think fundamentally why. And I do television, and I enjoy television. I'm doing some telly tomorrow on Jeremy Vine's show on Channel 5. It's lovely doing telly, and it's great, and I adore it, and I never want to stop doing it because I adore it. But there's nothing like the medium of radio. It's truly magical. It really is, and I've been captivated by this thing since I was a kid. So going back to your question, being passion, my passion is to create great radio that engages the audience, and where I can be whether I'm doing, I've gone back to doing some music radio after 6 years at the BBC for various reasons, but I'm saying very little between the records for the first time in my career, for the first time in 20 years, and there is an art to keeping it really short. Yeah. The word economy, there's a real art form to doing that. And some people, throw it away and call it very disposable and generic torture. But there's a real art form. And one of the DJs that worked in the local radio station where I worked, a guy called Carl Kingston, And me and Chris Moyles, because we've known each other since we were, 13, something like that. We used to help Carl out on alternate nights.
Yeah.
But we used to go to Carl's house sometimes, and Carl's a geek. And he was born in the mid-1950s, grew up listening to pirate radio in the 1960s, but a big fan of American radio. So Carl would buy these tapes from America, from this company called California Air Checks. And you could get the video version because there was this guy called Art Volo who went around with a video camera and travelled all of the states of America to these little tiny radio stations that were in caravans in the side of highways that sounded huge, to Z100 and all of these big, massive radio stations in New York or whatever, or Chicago. And we'd watch these videos and just be inspired by these DJs or broadcasters that kept it really tight, but it was fast paced at a million miles an hour. So there is a real art form to doing that. But there was also, and the one thing what I loved about working for the BBC is the fact that I remember I'd not been there long at all, and I was doing my afternoon, but I was doing an afternoon show. And I think the news was on at 2:30 or something. And I'd got a guest on next. I played one record after the 2:30 news, and it's something like 2:36, I started talking, and I didn't finish talking until the 3:00 news, which to me was like, I think it's called a link when you talk in between two items. So whether that item was the last song or the news that's coming up or the next song, it's called a link. I was like, that's the longest link I have ever done in my entire career.
Probably in the world.
Yeah, probably actually. But
record.
For me, that was like, gosh, I've never done that before. And then that became a drug. That became of like, right, I love engaging, because I've always loved speech radio from tuning around the dial as a kid.
Can I just take you back to that point as a child? Because obviously that was a spark.
Yeah.
That ignited something in you that was an interest that you've obviously maintained and sustained through your life and through your career. But how did you, because I mean, I think it's quite interesting, the listeners would be quite interested to hear how you took that interest and it became the career. Because, you go to school, you're knocking around with your friends, you sort of play out what you're going to do. You're going to be a footballer, you're going to be a ballerina, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be whatever it might be is your chosen career. Did you get a chance to sort of try things out as a child that might, that gave you that opportunity?
No, it was always radio. It was always.
Yeah, but did you find a way to use, I don't know, that passion to be able to get people's attention to what you wanted to do?
I think I annoyed people more than anything with my I just go on about radio. There was a radio station that Carl worked at, and the station that we always have our favourite radio station, whether it was Radio 1 back in the day when we were growing up, or whether it's your local independent commercial radio station. And mine was a station in Leeds called Radio Air.
Yeah.
And I used to ring up a guy who did the phone-in show late at night called James Whale, who you can now hear on Talk Radio.
James Whale.
He used to do this Friday night show on ITV called the James Whale Radio Show, which was visualised, but that actually was in Studio 1 at Radio Air. So it was actually inside the radio station I worked in. And that was exciting, a TV show, being in the actual radio station.
Radio goes on TV. Yeah.
Radio, visualizes it, yeah. And because television is just radio with pictures, that's all it is. And so I'd be calling James up on the old dialing tone for Leeds, which was the old dialing code for Leeds, which was 0532 455 362, and I would dial it really quickly on our telephone. And James used to do this thing between 10 and 11 o'clock at night called Do-It-Yourself Dedications, because the phone-in started at 11 through to 1. That's when it got adult. And or adults to a point, which is broadcastable.
Yep.
And between 10 and 11, you could come on and you could introduce your favourite record. So whether it was Duran, whether it was, I don't know, Mel and Kim or something like that, from the 80s, late 80s or whatever. And I used to call up all the time, and eventually I got told to stop calling because I rang every single night.
Oh my God, you got banned.
I got banned, and then I used to ring other DJs and ask them, can I come in and have a look around? And eventually there was one guy called Paul Stead, who's a incredibly wonderful, award-winning television producer, and there's quite a lot of TV shows he's created. The Yorkshire Vet, which is on Channel 5, Friday on the Farm, which is filmed near where I live. And Paul's a dear friend, and he got me in radio, and I never left the state. I went in at 12, just shy of my 13th birthday, to make
You were 12 years old.
Yeah.
You got a break into going to the radio.
Yeah, and making tea for the DJs and putting records away. And I didn't leave until I was 18. Got on the air at 16, just shy of my 17th birthday.
You were actually broadcasting at 16?
Actually broadcasting, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the guy who was doing the overnight show was off, and there was no one else to do it. So it was, and I'd given the boss tape after tape after tape after tape. A guy called Paul Fairbairn, I constantly giving him tapes, saying, I'm good enough. Come on, put me on. So
this is sort of a demo of you.
Yeah. I'd been in the actual. I used to spend a lot of time actually, because once I'd got a key card for the building with my own, number where I could open the security doors. That was it. I could go in whenever I wanted. Yeah. So it was always fun to go in when not in working hours, and plus I'd have been at school.
Yeah.
But after leaving school, I used to spend a lot of time there just practicing in the studio. And I'd always had a home studio as well, because my dad was in bands in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So he'd have lots of surplus equipment. He was a singer in a band and guitarist. So when he wasn't working, I'd steal his, professional microphone, tape machines and bits and pieces. So I'd have a little studio rigged up. And, it was a half-decent studio, to be honest, really good. In fact, I was looking on eBay because I found a picture of my old studio, and I noticed it was one of the tape decks I had was made by TIAC for any geek.
Solid gear.
Yeah, and I looked on eBay at what the cassette deck is. It's selling for nearly £1,000 because they're so rare, these cassette decks, and they're very good quality. So all of my recordings from me practicing in my bedroom are really good quality. Everything sounds actually okay.
Fortunately, all mine are on very bad, poor tapes, but I'm not worried about that.
Well, I've just started digitizing. I've started transferring stuff recently and listening back to old stuff, which I've never done because I'm always one to kind of move forward.
Move forward, yeah.
It's okay. You can have a little toe in the past, but I'm always one for kind of moving forward. What's the next thing I can create? What's the next thing? So yeah, I was in from a very early age, and
So
David,
can you remember the first song that you introduced?
Yes. And it's the first song, because I didn't dare change it. It was in what they call a music log, and the heads of music were very strict.
So you got a playlist to play to, and that's
yeah, you had a playlist to play, and it was a 5-hour overnight show between 1 and 6 a.m. And my first song was there's a band from the 70s called the Rubettes. And it wasn't Sugar Baby Love, it was their previous hit, Jukebox Jive. Because what used to happen, it was a really odd music policy, because you'd got, and just very quickly explain this, the Independent Broadcasting Authority in the late 1980s said to the commercial radio stations, look, you've got two frequencies here. You've got your AM service, which was the traditional way of listening to radio. But in the 1980s, FM became huge. People started buying FM radios. Quality is much better. So they said, look, you can split frequencies and create two stations instead of having one. So that's how the gold stations arrived, like Capital Gold, and Magic 828 was the one in Leeds. So the station Magic, which is national across the country, that's actually born out of Magic 828. That was the first station called Magic, which was launched in this country, and it's owned by the same company that owned it back then. And Radio Air was Air FM, as it became, was on FM. So, but they used to come together overnight because it was cheaper to have one DJ overnight. But you had a music policy which was all over the shop, because you'd have Bobby V and then the Shaman. Which was, for anyone who knows their 1990s early dance music, it was bizarre. So you get easy good, is Ebenezer good? How many tears can you find when you're sad and lonely? It was bizarre. The music.
How many basically get down and beat them grandmas are out there? I don't know.
Oh my word! It was the music policy was all over the shop, and so the first song was Jukebox Jive by the Rubettes, followed by Billy Ray Cyrus and Achy Breaky Heart.
Okay.
Who I introduced as Billy Ray Cypress.
Oops.
Which still to this
I
very
can
day.
see why you would do that. See, that's a
God.
fairly easy thing to make, but at 16 and you're making your first.
Yeah. I think I was so nervous. Nervous. If anyone comes to see my Believe Achieve, being a public speaker these days, I do play a clip of it in my talk, because the talk that I do is full of it's full of radio stuff, but also it's got a lot of my personal anguish and stuff that I went through, which we'll come on to at some point, I'm guessing.
Actually, this is a perfect spot because people are listening to this now, they'll listen to it in various sections. They won't necessarily listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I like to give an opportunity for my guests to be able to do their own ad break. You are in a perfect position to do your own ad break right now. It's like, go to ads. Just let us know a little bit about Stephanie and where people can get hold of you and the sorts of things you're doing. Brief précis of your talk.
Yeah, well, you can follow me on my socials. It's just Stephanie Hirst across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter,
HResource.
LinkedIn. Yeah, HIRST. I don't mind if you spell it HU. You just won't find me. You can find me across LinkedIn and all sorts of stuff. Give us a follow and a chat. My direct messages are open and all sorts of stuff like that. Obviously, as a broadcaster, I work for one of the biggest media operators in the UK, Bauer Media Audio, and I work for their brand called HResource. Yeah. And I do a Saturday night show on there, which is predominantly based around 90s, noughties, and, some from probably the 10s, dance anthems, because I started DJing in my kitchen about 5 years ago. Bizarrely, when Facebook Live first appeared, I started, because I've DJed all around the world, whether it be Ibiza or Miami Music Conference or, local nightclub down the road, all over the shop. So I've always enjoyed DJing live. And I started randomly DJing in my kitchen. So I created this little brand called Kitchen Belters. Because of those people of a certain age, those people in their maybe late 30s, 40s, early 50s, they bought this stuff in the 90s and noughties. So, and I figured that, if you're cooking dinner and it's 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, stick us on Facebook so you could watch me DJing, give live shout outs and all. And there was like 100,000 people watching. I was like, this is nuts.
It's crazy. I mean, the nature of my job and being a geek myself, I've partaken in the TikTok.
Yes.
And have you got a TikTok account as well?
I do, but I don't really use it, and I really should start using TikTok.
The number of DJs, I'm telling you,
there's
the number
lots
of DJs that are on there, and you'd catch on very quickly. Yeah,
I think it's just another one. It's just another thing to worry about, isn't it? It's another social platform that you have to kind of. DJing has always been something, along with radio, which is really important to me. But I also have my public speaking strand as well, which has got many layers to it. One of the layers, of course, is radio and me getting into radio, because I was always told from a very early age that you can't be on the radio. You can't. You're from a working class council estate in Barnsley, where we've only just got electricity, and you can't do that. You've not been to university. Your accent isn't, or how you speak isn't received pronunciation. You can't do that. Well, I can. There's no such word as can't. And I got really bullied.
It completely adds flavour to the. I went to school. I spent 18 years growing up in Gloucester.
Right.
You'd never know. Because if you speak to my sister, you'd think, oh yeah, Southwest. You're right. I got tooth, and the way she speaks, I don't know what happened to me. I think I have an affliction. My accent never developed.
It's a great. You've got yours. Yours is very neutral.
Yeah,
I
boring.
do. Yeah. No, I do wish mine was more neutral, but I am
No. Own it.
Quite
Seriously.
professionally northern.
Isn't it weird what you don't have, you always want?
Well, true, actually, yes. Yeah, there is that.
And I don't have that identity, so I like to think that, maybe I could. I used to play around with accents a lot, which is probably why I was trying to sort of like hold back onto myself. Weird. Either that, or I just thought I didn't like the Gloucester accent, so I just wasn't gonna. I wasn't gonna take that on.
You've got a great accent.
But yeah, so I mean, it's for me, and I've got a cousin who lives in Doncaster. I spent quite a bit of time in Hatfield Woodhouse when I worked with Thomas Cook back in the day. I love the accent. I think it's fabulous, as is the Lancashire accent, actually the Southwest accent, Norwich and all. I think it brings something, doesn't it,
I think it does, yeah. There's a real humanity about it, isn't there? I love the regional accents, and it's wonderful hearing, especially the continuity announcers on television and the different regional accents that you hear these days, not just your standard received pronunciation, the BBC.
There's some very Welsh people out there.
Yeah, I really enjoy hearing the different accents these days, and the diversity, because diversity and inclusion is something that's very, it's very important and close to me.
Yeah.
Because of what I went through myself, is that, I knew I wanted to be on the radio from a very, very, very early age, but I also knew that I wasn't a boy. So I transitioned. In fact, do you know why? We were chatting before we started recording. It's 7 years ago today that I did this interview on BBC 5 Live with the wonderful broadcaster Stephen Nolan when I announced that I was transitioning. And because I thought I was going to lose everything. So a lot of my public speaking, well, all of my public speaking, I have a brand called Believe Achieve, because I got really bullied at school really badly because I was small, effeminate, talked a bit too much about radio, and Shaking Stevens. That probably didn't do me any favours. Probably didn't. I loved shaking when I was little. And so I think because I was and knowing from a very early age that I wasn't a boy, but I couldn't quite verbalize it. So when they used to put at school, they'd put the girls into one side of the classroom and the boys in the other.
Yeah.
And I'd just go and sit with the girls because that was my natural state of comfortableness. I'd just go and sit there.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, back over here, you. So then they'd do it again a week later or something, or for whatever reason we had to split up into girls and boys. I just go and sit with the girls again. I'm like, back over here. So that was it's my default. Even before I knew the difference between girls and boys, when you go into preschool and all that kind of stuff. And this was raised to my mum and blah, blah, blah. But my mum did what probably every parent did and brushed it under the carpet, because there was no Google. She couldn't look this stuff up. There was no information out there or anything like that.
For all she knew, you were a unique sort of entity, that there might be rare examples of this, but
yeah,
it was embarrassing maybe for, I don't know.
I don't know. I just possibly. Maybe I just don't think there was any information.
Yeah.
And then I quickly learned that I think the kids had worked out that I was different before I'd worked it out.
Yeah.
And we know how vile children can be sometimes.
Well, they just pick on the difference, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's colour, whether it's just the way you speak, the way you look,
absolutely,
the way you dress.
Children can be just kids are wonderful, but wow, when we've all been children and we've all been there.
Yeah.
We just don't know any different until we're taught that.
Yeah.
So we do find, whether it's the kid at school that's slightly overweight, or the kid that wears glasses, or the kid that's got ginger hair, or the kid that's really effeminate, a la me. And I learned very quickly that by doing that, you got your head kicked in. So the only escapism for me was that radio on the windowsill over there.
That was your world.
We talked about. That was my world. So I would sit listening to the radio, imagining, so just closing my eyes, of what it would be like to be on the radio. And that was the thing that I found. That was the sticking plaster. That was the thing that made it go away. So luckily later on in life, I didn't turn to drink. I didn't turn to drugs or anything like that. Because that could have happened if I not had radio, I could have turned to something that would take the pain away.
Well, I've by way of researching for the podcast, I actually happened to catch a bit of Nahal on Radio 5 broadcast, and although he wasn't interviewing the author at the time, he referenced a book by Sean Fay.
Yes, yeah. It's a brand new book that's just come out, actually.
The transgender issue.
Yes.
And
I've just bought it, actually. I've not read it yet. And
I'm about 3/4 of the way through, but some of the statistics that are mentioned fairly early on are quite staggering, as in 45% of teens who are trans attempt suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, that, but when you listen to your story, which was one of somebody that is, at a time where it was less enlightened, you've found something that is your window, if you like, to another world and somewhere where you can escape to, and you can be respected or understood, or have somewhere where you can go where you're not going to face the physical abuse, the mental abuse, the name calling, whatever it might be.
I think radio stations are interesting places because on one side it's a business, and you have managing director, and you have sales director, and then the sales team, and then you've got the news journalists and, head of news and all that kind of stuff. And that's the serious side of the business. Then you've got programming. And it's literally like, and I think that all, grouping us all in here, if any broadcasters are listening, I'm sorry, I don't want to offend you, but we're all a bit odd. Why do you want to sit in a small, air-conditioned, padded cell, essentially, soundproof room, and talk to yourself?
Yeah.
Why? Now, I can't quite work it out, and I don't know what drives me to it. It is magical, but you are imagining that you're talking to one person or whatever. Yeah. And it does take a particular personality. I've met really, really, really outgoing, larger-than-life characters who are brilliant on the radio. Yeah. I've also met very introverted, shy, people that can be so, I don't know, within themselves, but in a radio studio they come alive.
They wake up, yeah. It's incredible.
It's the spectrum of personalities that a radio station attracts is really quite fascinating. Perfect for the psychiatrist chair.
Yeah.
So to be in that world, it's pure escapism, David. It's absolute escapism. And being in there as a kid, in a radio station, and then growing up all through my life working in these stations, it's pure escape. It takes it away. To any problems that you have or anything like that, it's show business,
It's performance, isn't it? It's performance art.
It's like working in the theatre.
Exactly. This very similar reflection, I guess, of what you would find in a theatre, in a ballet company, in a musical production, even in a band.
Yeah,
even in a band on the stage, you look at the different characters there are in a different, with the Spice Girls or the Shaman or whatever.
Whatever happened to Mr. C?
You're going to find different personalities.
Yeah.
So you found your tribe.
I guess I did find my tribe. And some people were very complex. Some people were ego driven. And I'm sure I had my moments. I'm sure I did, and I know I did actually in the depths of despair when radio wasn't making my gender issues go away anymore. I know I went through a difficult period on the show that we had a show called Hirsty's Daily Dose. Hirst being my surname, but it wasn't my show; it was our show, and I always say whoever's working on the show, it's not my show. It might be my name above the door, even though it says fire exit. But it's our show. All of us bring something to the party. It's a team effort. And I do know from speaking to Jojo, who hosted the show with me, and there was a guy called Danny. Neither me or Jojo have spoken to Danny for many years. But Jojo, she counseled me through a lot of my troubled times, and she understood. But she says you were a pain in the ass at times. Probably stronger words than that.
Is this before the 2014 or after?
Yeah. This is before. Yeah. This is before everything. I guess probably anxiety, actually. Probably anxiety. I don't suffer with anxiety now. And I never used to, actually, growing up. But when I knew that a decision had to be made, that's when anxiety really started to get to me. And that's when I really couldn't. Because
I guess, and this is so I'm an atypical, uneducated, middle-aged white man who just trying to understand.
This is how people learn. We have conversations.
This is me trying to learn. But I'm trying to put myself into the shoes, depending on what type of shoe you're wearing at the time. But
probably Converse, actually.
Okay,
tops.
Comfortable. What I would be trying to think of is, you're living a life to be accepted in a particular way when you know yourself that is not you. And I can't imagine anything more conflicting or disturbing, really, in terms of how do you wrestle with that, other than by going to the degree you did and actually saying, right, this is it. I'm going to officially announce now, this is what's happening, put it out there, and I'm going to make this happen. Because otherwise you're just living life for somebody else, for everybody else around you. Is that fair?
I think that's actually, and the word that you used, conflict, it just sums it up perfectly. There was a huge conflict in my head. On the one hand, I was sitting in the studio, and very much actually the thing I'm sat in front of now, the mixing desk thing, is identical to the one I used to use when I did my old morning show. And I would sit there chatting to Danny and Jojo and the other team that was around us and everything, and the texts would come in from the listeners. We could do 2,000 texts a show sometimes.
Wow.
Just get in touch. We had 1.4 million listeners. It was huge. And that number compared to the listeners, but bear in mind that only 5% of your audience will ever get in touch with you on a radio station. How many times, if you're listening to this right now, have you ever texted a radio station? Probably not. But, only a small amount do. But, when you're getting that amount of text coming in, it was difficult to press stop on it because this thing was motoring along. We had to put a shelf up. We won loads of awards. We were very lucky. We were held in high regard.
So what are you winning your awards for? Do you mind just sort of...
Just for, whether it was, best broadcaster or, best breakfast show, or we got nominated for this and that. We picked up a ton of awards, and we were very, very, very lucky. And the industry talked about us.
Obviously very good.
It was a very dysfunctional show. It's a very dysfunctional family. In fact, only this weekend, someone tweeted a clip from one of our podcasts, which was probably the more riskier version. This was in the early days of podcasts. Although I think this podcast clip was from like 2013 or something. It was slightly risque, the podcast version. But then the amount of people that tweeted me over the weekend about how much they loved this show. Yeah. And luckily, I think I feel very blessed that this show, and if you were from Yorkshire and you listened on whether it was Galaxy or Capital that we became, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, I've always struggled to describe the show. It was dysfunctional, unplanned, unscripted, less about us, myself, Danny and Jojo, but more about the audience.
Yeah.
And it was just funny because it was we never knew what was going to happen. And I think because I pressed stop on it, and it was at its peak after 12 years or whatever, it went out on top. So in some people's memories, it's held in high regard and they remember it fondly. Not that, or they ran out of ideas.
It's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it? To know when the peak is hit.
Yeah. And I used to do that with a lot of the features or things that we used to do on the show. If we'd found something that was a real success, I used to cancel it after, a few months or a few weeks, because we could always bring it back and people would still find it, entertaining. Not that we'd rinsed it, because it's a bit like the X Factor, isn't it? It was brilliant when it first arrived, but then it just became just a diluted, shiny. Just so I didn't want it to be like that. But when you're sitting there hosting the show, knowing that your gender's wrong, and you've got a secret life, you're going home after doing this huge show that everyone's talking about, and then you're putting a wig on, and you're living a double life in some respects. Not every day, but for a period of time, because I was trying to find, can I do this? I know I need to do it.
Yeah.
And I'd gone through periods in my life where I could deal with it. I could have 6 months or so, and I could bury it under the carpet. If I filled my diary, which was easy to do.
Yeah.
If I made the diary packed, very busy, it would disappear out of my mind a little bit. But it was always there. It was the noise wasn't as loud. But there was periods in my life. 17 was really difficult. Passed my driving test, went to my doctors. I spoke to my GP about it when I was 17. He said, I told him that I didn't feel like I was male, and And he said, I strongly recommend you don't take this path in life. You'll lose family, friends. You won't have a successful life.
Okay.
So immediately got back into my Vauxhall Nova, and sat in the car park and cried my eyes out and thought, right,
bless you,
I can't do this. So I'm gonna have to throw myself into radio, and I did. I was probably more obsessed than I ever was, listening to so much different radio, whether it was music radio or speech radio or, late night radio on Radio 1, like Victor Lewis Smith and Chris Morris and all that comedy stuff, and just being inspired by that.
So to a certain extent, this is at a point where, your passion sort of took you out of problems at school and other areas of your life. And at this point, the passion is also something that probably saved your life, to a greater extent.
I think
it took you out of any darker thoughts of, if authority figures are telling you, don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do the thing that actually, that's not informed, decisions now, and the way that you'll be consulted with now, one would hope. But back in the day, with a lack of information and
that's what you did.
Ill-informed GPs, they would be thinking, what if this was my son telling me this? Then I wouldn't want that to happen. No. I think we're more enlightened now. I certainly like
massively, and thank goodness we are. And then I had a rough time at 21. 25 was really bad. And then at 25, I started hosting breakfast shows. So I was getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's a good distraction, because, you go and give your all for 4 hours in the morning. By the time 10 o'clock comes around, your brain is fried.
Yeah.
And, you get home and you sleep some of the day, and, you feel generally jet lagged. So that's a good thing, because that made it go away, because, I slept quite a bit. So,
it's hard work though, that is. That really shift patterns can really mess you up, can't they?
Yeah.
Any type of work when you're out of your normal.
Massively. 30 was, I had it in 5-year blocks where it would just really wreck me. And I say 5 years, actually, no, it wrecked me every single day. But I had mini breakdowns looking back in 5-year blocks. And I got to 35 and just was like, I can't do this anymore. So I went to my GP again. I had lunch with a friend called Kate. And I told her when I was 17, when I had mini breakdown at 17. And she brought it up in conversation about how you're doing with that gender stuff. How's your head? And I just said, I want to die. I just want to die. And I went through a period of planning to take my own life, how I was going to do it, all sorts of stuff, looking it up, writing a lot about it. You know, wrote letters if anyone was to find me. Because the narrative that was being pushed by the media was that anyone who dares to transition and finds the courage and strength to do this is on the bottom rung of the ladder in society.
And you wouldn't, and just by way of context as well, all through recent and long-term history, there has been difficulties with anybody that announced that they were going to take this position, be they a mechanic or a builder. You know, the press would find them and turn them into some sort of freak show for the salacious viewing of their audience.
David, I would sit in the studio on a weekday morning hosting the show and have all the newspapers, whether it was the broadsheets or the red tops, and you'd be flicking through them and you would see stories about someone who had transitioned. Really bad side profile picture as masculine, because the stories traditionally, let's not forget that, you know, people that were born or at birth, you know, on their birth certificates, female, whereas, you know, their soul and brain is male, they transitioned, but they didn't particularly, the media didn't particularly focus on people that transitioned from female to male. It was always what I saw was the other way around. So whether it was Sex Change Charlie or Gender Bending Freak, or it was always a really bad pun headline with a really bad story, and this person has lost everything. Hurrah! Yeah. Look at the person that's lost everything, everyone. Look, when you see one like that walking down the street, point, spit.
There was a successful model in the 60s, April Ashley.
April Ashley, yes, of course.
1961, the Sunday People ran a story, end of career.
Yeah.
End of career.
Done. End of career. Caroline Cossey. In the 1980s, she was and she's my heroine. She was the woman I saw on television when I was about 11 years old, and she was the first person that made me feel like I wasn't alone. And I play a clip in my Believe Achieve public speaking talk, which is actually a copy of the video I recorded when I was 11, because I was on the sofa and she was on television. I must have been off school or something, and I woke up and she's on television explaining about how she felt as a child and then she wasn't a boy. And I was like, it was literally, I was stopped. I stopped him. Yeah. So I got off the sofa, grabbed the nearest videotape and stuck it in the machine, and no one ever saw that videotape again because it hid under my bed. And that was my Google. Yeah. And then the internet arrived. If we fast forward a few years, the internet arrives. I get dial-up internet. The first thing apart from Googling for radio stuff,
of course,
still a geek. One of the first things or not even Google, Ask Jeeves or whatever, or Netscape or whatever it used to be. One of the first things I looked for was for people, who were, and it was the term was transsexual back then, but that's a very outdated term because, that sexualizes gender. And this has got nothing to do with sex because that's what people thought. It was something a bit kinky.
They love to pathologize, don't they?
Yeah, massively pathologize stuff. Yeah. So, and that was one of the first things I Googled. I found a website called singular R, not alone. You are not alone, or something like that. And it was a website that someone started. You'll probably be able to find it on, the Wayback Internet machine? It'll probably exist. It'll be cached somewhere. You could probably look at it. I've not looked at it, actually. I remember it being, I don't know, grey and pink or something. But I remember sitting there on my Windows 95 machine with a 56k dial-up and just looking on this thing, because it seemed, there was a few people that were sharing their stories. And that made you feel less alone. Yeah. And then YouTube arrives. And then people start to vlog their journeys. And that was a real turning point for me, because that showed me that successful people around the world of my age then had transitioned.
Yeah.
And that gave you strength. That showed you that you could do this. And that really helped. That really, really, really helped when people sharing their stories. So I think that's why and I go through periods where I talk about this. I'm currently going through a period where I'm talking about it. But because after I did the story, I did the Stephen Nolan interview, which weirdly is 7 years ago today. Which
Happy
is
birthday.
odd that thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm 7 years old. Do I get cake?
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yes, I'm definitely going to send you some cookies.
Weirdly, the radio that I talked about, which is on my windowsill, I got that for my 7th birthday. How weird.
That is incredible.
Weird. So,
What do you find that weird when things like that sort of
it's odd, isn't it? It's very odd. It's very odd that I'm talking about that thing that links me to the thing that I went through and we're talking about this. It's very odd. I think some things are meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I did the interview with Stephen Nolan, which I think is still available, you can still listen to it.
Oh, it's definitely...
It's still out there.
I can definitely assure you it's still available.
Recorded the interview because I quit my show on Capital. Thanks to amazing friends and people who I'd come out to privately, and they helped me.
Yeah.
And so many people rallied round and made sure I was okay. One of my former bosses, who was in Australia at the time, was helping me on Skype long before Teams and Zoom. And he said to me that I wasn't going to go public with it. And he said, you could save a life, not lives, a life.
Yeah.
So I thought that was important because I suddenly took me back to that You're Not Alone website and people's vlogs and how important it is to share your story because it helps others. From my friends, I can name them all. I don't want to leave anyone out, but you know who you are. Yeah. My tribe, who really... one of my friends, Victoria, and one of my other friends, Catherine, who really just, and Kate, who made me go to the hospital, and so many others, and my friend Steve. Oh, there's so many. I'm going to leave someone out, and you're going to be offended. But people really kind of gathered round and protected me. And then the decision comes that, right, I'm going to do this. After going to my GP for the second time, I get on the pathway, and now if you go to your GP and say, what I told my GP, that my gender's wrong and I need to do something about it because I want to die. You are referred to the gender identity clinic, and I was seen within the 18-week period or something.
Right.
That you need to be referred by. It can be up to 3 years.
What?
Yeah, just to get your first appointment at the gender identity clinic. And this is purely because of the sheer weight of people coming through the system. Because I look at this in a very childlike way, not the system, but how things, turned out for me whilst I was cooking in the womb. And sometimes biology goes out and gets a bit drunk. Mm. And just like when we're waking up with a hangover or whatever, you can, or if you're still a bit drunk, you can, I don't know, put butter in your bag and mobile phone in the fridge or whatever, and vice versa. You can put things in the wrong order when you're a little bit tipsy. Or
listen, when you get to my age, you don't have to be drunk. It just happens on an all too frequent
Oh, bless you. So I think that biology sometimes gets a bit drunk and puts things in the wrong order. Children can be born with limbs that are different, learning difficulties, all sorts of different things. We're all different. Yeah. And my brain formed opposite to the way I came out looking like. My soul formed differently, and it was more aligned to female. And my body was it was just at odds. Yeah. I remember looking down in between my legs going, that's not meant to be there.
Yeah.
And why had I said that from an early age? And I'm still saying it into my 30s. That's because my brain formed opposite to the way, I came out looking.
There's a very brief piece within Sean Fay's book.
Yes, yeah.
About interviewing a young couple who've got a young child. I think she might be 3. And they were struggling or had been struggling with this whole situation. The child was born as a boy, but got very, very upset when they were called a good boy. Call me say I've been a good girl. And that's one example. And they were 3 years old. And they just would get incredibly upset because it was something not quite computing, not quite working. Not particularly feminine in the way they presented in other ways, but just hard-baked, hardwired, knew that this was wrong. So sorry, I interrupted you, but I just thought that's an interesting take on, and actually what happens now is that people I think there's a greater awareness. So those parents are getting all the right advice, the right support, and are taking things forward, but we're still quite concerned about what the local services might do if they decided to back that child's position. If the school were still trying to sort of put them in very clearly defined gender, situations. It
is a minefield, and we're still learning about this.
Yeah.
Especially with when it comes to children, because as children, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, you got a clout round the ear hole and you got told to man up or whatever.
Yeah,
pretty much. That was it.
Pretty much.
That was it. It was as simple as that, which was wrong, of course, but we didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
And now we're more aware and we're more informed, and people are having conversations about this. We're starting to learn more about it. Look, I remember going to the gender identity clinic and chatting through all of the options that were available to me. I was like, have you got a pill that I can take that will make this go away? Because look, they're pumping 200 grand a year in the bank account for me doing a morning show. There's an Aston Martin sat on the drive, right? Everything's lovely. I really don't want to blow this up and lose everything, because I love it. As we've learned, I'm a radio geek, and I'm going to lose all of this. All of this is going to go. Fact. Because no one had kept it in my field of work. No one had transitioned and kept it. In fact, one of my friends, Kim, who really helped me so much, and she transitioned probably about 7 or 8 years before I did. I remember being with her in Manchester, and I was really struggling with it. And she said to me, you have to be prepared to lose everything. Now, she didn't mean to set me back, but that did set me back. And she didn't mean to, but she was doing the right thing.
It's expectations, isn't it?
It was, and I wasn't prepared at that point to lose everything, because I was absolutely, and if someone's listening to this, then dismissing what I'm saying, no, because I was terrified.
This is tough.
This
is really tough stuff.
I would come out to someone in private. Someone would come to a friend would come to dinner at my house. I build it myself up to telling them about this because I just needed someone to talk to, and my teeth were chattering and I was shivering because I was so afraid. What was, would they get up and walk out? Would I lose them? David, I was terrified. I was more scared than I'd ever been with any single thing in my life, because of the narrative that was pushed in the world to people like me. Yeah. And I was just scared that I was going to lose everything I'd ever worked for. But you've got to remember, there's a lot of material things. Material things doesn't matter. Does it really matter that they're pumping 200 grand a year? Yes, it's nice. But does it really matter?
Are you happy?
The main thing is, am I happy now? Yes.
Yeah.
Was I happy then? No.
Yeah.
I was happy with it. I enjoyed my work. But that show was never going to last forever. And I think when I'd written a lot of things down and worked a lot of things out, and I was like, right, okay, how many years has this show got left in it? Now, we could have gone on for 20 years. Some shows do. But it was dysfunctional, and it was starting to tire of the dysfunctionality about the actual show workings itself.
Did you ever consider at any point during the height of that show that if you were to come out at that point, what that would do? Whether there might be a sudden rating spike as interest peaked, and then suddenly the bosses came down and said, "Yeah, that's all very interesting, but we're gonna move on with the show now. That's it."
I don't know. It did cross my mind.
Did you fear the rejection? Obviously, fearing the rejection.
Yeah, fearing the rejection did cross my mind, but I class myself as a professional in this industry, and it wasn't the way to do it.
Yeah,
it was not. Just like
because it might be perceived as being a publicity stunt as opposed to being actually somebody's life.
Exactly, and it wasn't the right thing to do. Just like, you know, you never hear radio broadcasters sometimes do their last show on the air. They're sometimes whipped off because the management are afraid that they're going to do something on their last show. And I've always been very lucky to be, a lot of the time, given the opportunity to do a last show because I think I'm trusted.
Yeah.
And I would never, ever do anything which would jeopardize or burn bridges. It's not how I roll.
Well, it's a big world, but a small world, isn't it?
Massively. Don't you know,
don't burn bridges.
Don't burn bridges, exactly. So so it was very much a case of, right, let's stop this and let's get on with it. And the only way to kind of, I guess, I had a few months off. I mentioned Chris earlier, Chris Miles, we've been friends and best mates since we were kids at Radio Air in Leeds. And as the years have gone on, you know, become incredibly tight. And he stood by me and just was incredible and would ask the most, and he would always say to me, this is a ridiculous question, but I'm learning. And he would ask me all of these questions, and it was just brilliant because he was learning. He was learning like a lot of my friends were. They would ask me these questions, and I would be able to answer them. And we'd never been on holiday together, so we went off to LA, and I had an amazing, did 2 spells in LA and had an amazing time. And then I came back, and then my publicist Megan at the time, you know, we were looking at how we're going to release this story, how we're going to share this story. So it was a no-brainer really to do it on radio. So she spoke to 5 Live, and 5 Live said, yeah, you can come and do it here. Where would you like to do it? I think she said to me, you could do the interview anywhere on 5 Live apart from the breakfast show, because the trouble is with breakfast is it moves so quickly, so they won't have.
It's happening all the time.
It's happening. They won't have the time to dedicate to it. You need an hour.
Yeah.
So because it's long form. So and I love Stephen Nolan. I think he's an incredible broadcaster.
He's on top class.
BBC Ulster every weekday morning, and then 5 Live. I went in on the Thursday, pre-recorded it. We recorded 49.5 minutes. They didn't edit it at all. It went out on the Saturday night in its entirety. I was sat in Chris's kitchen with my publicist Megan and friend Megan. You know, not just publicist. She I owe her a great deal because she helped me navigate through the potential. I don't know what language is like on this, but the potential shitstorm that was coming my way.
That's okay. We've got an explicit button we can push.
And but luckily, it was all good. Yeah. And they had the interview. Eddie Izzard rang from New York.
Wow. It's power. I tell you, it's powerful stuff. It's definitely worth. Definitely.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then they ran it again on the Sunday night in its entirety again. And
I think you saved more than a life with that broadcast, I must say. I think it really did. It spoke. And this isn't somebody who's going through that journey, obviously, but you know, for me, I thought that's brave, because at that point in your transition, you were working through it. There were you were taking hormone treatment. You were working with your voice, you know, as to how that might be, and you know, lots of things had yet to happen. So it was still quite.
Oh gosh, yeah, and I say to anyone who knows someone that's going through a transition or someone who is about to embark on it or something, you do not, when you announce it, it's like, ta-da, here I am, that's it. You don't stay like that. It will take you a number of years to find your groove, because you've got to kind of go through the awkward teenage years, making bad fashion mistakes and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and finding your voice as well, because voice was really important to me as a broadcaster, because it's the thing that the listener connects to.
It's your tool.
And that was the single hardest. Transitioning was easy compared to learning how to do radio again. And I had a year off or something went back to do a show on BBC Radio Manchester. They gave me a Saturday night show, and because I didn't want anything too big. I think I said to the bar, I said, "What's the show you've got with the lowest audience figures?" I think she said Saturday nights. I went, "Give me that," because I didn't want something that was prime time. I needed to find my groove, and the first few shows were really difficult. Even though I never told anyone, I just couldn't do it. I'd sit in the studio. I knew instinctively how to use the studio because I've used these things my entire life. They may look a little bit different, but fundamentally they all work pretty much the same. And I got back into the studio, and even though I was looking different, I'd not finessed myself yet. I'd not, there was still a long way to go. But I couldn't, everything I was hearing in my headphones was how I used to sound. And I used to drive back home in tears. I couldn't see the road for tears. I had to pull over because I was just heartbroken what I was hearing. Then I would sit at home and I'd listen back to what I'd done and then write out everything that I'd said verbatim from the recording and then go through it word for word. Because as women, our vocabulary, how we use it, our enunciation and pronunciation, everything is different. The way we use words is different. And I had to explode it. No one helped me. No one's done this successfully in the world of radio. And I was like, right, I need to be able to do this. So through lots of speech therapy, I had a vocal injury, which left me with some scar tissue on one of my vocal cords from the abuse that I'd given my voice over the years from working in clubs and doing events and all sorts of stuff. So I had my vocal cords tightened, which helped get rid of a lot of the depth.
Yeah.
And made it more rounded and gave me some power back, which was good. And then more speech therapy and all sorts of stuff like that. And I found my voice, I found my place, and I joined the BBC full time. I was only doing a weekend show to start with at BBC Manchester, and I continued to do that whilst joining BBC Radio Leeds in Yorkshire to do 9 till midday. Mm-hmm. And that was the point where I started to find my groove. And I started to, because I call it air miles, because I was an injured athlete.
Oh.
And I couldn't do this. But being on every single day helped me find my place again and my confidence.
Like match fitness, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like getting.
Yeah. And I was listening back to every show. Just like Tom Daly will watch every single performance.
Yeah.
And you just want, and I just wanted to get it right. And I started on air at Manchester, I think it was back end of 2015. I started the show on Leeds early 2018. It was only the back of 2019 that I found my groove. And I did a silly voice or something on the show. And I'd never do, because I used to do loads of stupid voices all the time. And I would never go near that arena. I'd found my voice.
Yeah.
This is it. It's staying in this box, and
Don't
you are
break it.
leaving it. I'm not breaking it. I was scared of breaking it.
Yeah.
So I think I did something silly with it. I can't remember what I did. I've done an impression of somebody. I think I may have been talking about Cheryl Cole or something and did a Geordie impression of her or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought, I found my groove. This is it. And that, David, that was like winning life's lottery. That was the best thing in the world, because it was like, wow, I've had my cake and eaten it now, haven't I?
Yeah.
I've kept the career, and I've also found my groove back on the air again. This is just
the mojo returned. And
this is believe, achieve. This is so coming back to my public speaking and what I do and the message that I tell is that from being in the school library when I was being bullied and sitting there whilst all the other kids had gone home, but my library teacher, Miss Rose, would give me books, and she gave me a book one day and it had the words believe, achieve in it, and it always stuck in my head that, and I took something from that age 14 or 15, and believe, achieve has always been in my head. And that's what's driven me all the way through all of this. And that is, coming back to your first question, the passion. The passion is from believe, achieve. The passion is, right, I can do this. I'm going to find my way through this. I don't care who tells me that I can't do it. I will do it. And anyone that tells me I can't, I'll bloody well will.
Yeah.
And I'll try so hard. If it takes me years to do it, I will get there eventually. Because we've all got to have a purpose, haven't we?
Yeah, I've told this story a couple of times on podcasts because it resonated so strongly with me. I didn't have a shining school career, but I was invited back. Somebody found me on LinkedIn, and I had the job title of chief executive at the time, and I think they were scratching around trying to find somebody to give away the prizes. I went to a very, very traditional grammar school.
Likewise.
Yeah. All boys at the time I was there, co-ed now, so it was good. Anyway, I went and did the prize giving. I prepared a speech, and I was trying to give my best. I looked around for sort of inspirational speeches at that sort of event and trying to come up with ideas. And I wasn't really very happy with my speech, but I was so grateful that they hadn't told me about the fact that I had to talk pre the big evening speech to a group of sixth formers. And I hadn't been prepared for that at all. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? And I just asked them all, well, introduce yourself and tell me what you want to do for a career. Thinking at that age, I hadn't got a Scooby-Doo what I wanted to do. I hadn't got any way of thinking. I had things that I liked doing. I like messing about various different bits and pieces of broadcasting, whatever. But obviously, I didn't see that as a career for me. But I hadn't settled on anything, and I think that's normal. I think that's totally normal. And academically, I wasn't particularly brilliant. So I thought I'd ask the question. I was staggered by about 80% of the young people coming back to me saying exactly what they wanted to do for their career. 80%. And the universities they've got lined up and da-da-da-da. And my jaw was getting slacker and slacker as I was sort of going around this group. And I just couldn't believe it. What's happening here? So the university idea of going to university, and there was a big push at the time as well. And this is going back about 5 years. A lot more people were going to university. But obviously the fees had come in. So if you're going to university, make sure you do you do it and you've got your career in mind, because that's the message that was coming from the parents.
Don't waste it.
How many of those people were really following their passion, and how many people were following a career that they thought would pay them a decent salary? I would suggest that a large proportion of those people were just going for the money. So I decided to sort of rip up the crappy presentation that I'd given, and I talked all about, when you, on that Monday morning, when it's raining outside and it's cold and it's just that miserable Monday morning, and you've got to throw back the duvet and get yourself to work, is it going to be a hard job, or is it going to be something you really look forward to doing? Because I tell you what, you can be, if you're fortunate enough, you can be and stay healthy, you'll be at work a long time. Hadn't you better do something that you really feel good about and follow that passion? And I got some mixed results. There was a lot of parents which voted afterwards. The headmaster was very complimentary of what he said, but I think he was thinking I'd stirred the pot a little bit. I didn't care, because from my point of view, if I was
stir the pot, always stir the pot.
If I was one of the kids in the audience, I'd be thinking, well, so why do I want to be an accountant? There's nothing wrong with being an accountant, by the way. No, but that sounds like a very, or a solicitor. I've worked in the legal field. It does not pay as well as you think it does. To get to that very top as a partner or something, to earn the big bucks, incredibly long hours, lots of pressure, and even then you can't be guaranteed you're going to get the money. No. So it might as well follow something that you've got a passion and attribute for, a real, be it art, be it science. People getting into STEM matters.
So many more options these days, isn't there?
Yes,
and giving people. And from an early age, they can discover things. And, I go back to YouTube. You can do more research. Now, I'm a big fan of libraries. I love books. But, when you're watching people on YouTube, excelling in their chosen career, you can go, I want to do that. That's incredible. And you would only see, television, apart from the entertainment stuff, in the world of factual, would show us things we saw as children that you go, gosh, that's cool. Yeah. But then you never saw anything of it again until another program like that was probably commissioned 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. Whereas YouTube these days and the internet has opened up so many amazing possibilities for the children who are now growing up and can see their futures ahead of them and plan for that, can't they?
I think we're going to have a very interesting generation.
I think,
I think the Gen Zs, and I think they're called the Alpha generation, who are the babies, the bairns coming through now. I think they're going to be very interesting because they've grown up with the technology, they've grown up with the way to do things. Although for those in the younger generation, they've spent half their life in lockdown, so I mean they'll hopefully be quite resilient as well.
Hopefully. But anything's achievable, and I've always believed that. Follow your dreams. I know they're easy words to say, but you must follow your dreams.
Well, you're a demonstration of somebody who followed their dream from that very first AM to FM radio that sits on your windowsill that has inspired you and led your career to the point now where, you know, you've taken some very brave decisions in your life and you've proven inspiration not only find yourself in a situation where you've stood to lose everything, built things back to a point where you've a very strong career and you are changing lives. And I think that's passion personified, because I think you've shown it, and Believe Achieve is sort of encapsulates that very nicely.
I think it does, because I'd done the Nolan interview, and then 2 days later or 3 days later, it was the radio festival that was taking place in Manchester at the Lowry. And because the story about the Nolan interview and everything, it was all in the newspapers, and it was a big industry story as well. And the show was held in such high regard. And for me to leave my job and all sorts of stuff like that was, you know, that was unheard of me doing something like that.
Yeah.
So I was invited to be interviewed by the brilliant Phil Williams, who was on 5 Live, but he's now on Times Radio. And we were the closing interview at the festival. And, you know, lots of people go home and, you know, they'll disappear before maybe the last sessions or whatever. But the room at the Lowry Theatre in Manchester was it was rammed, and it was like 5 or 6 deep at the back.
Wow.
It was, and I walked on stage, and as standing ovations go, they clapped and clapped and clapped and clapped and didn't stop.
That's incredible.
The whole, and I can't tell you what that did. That
can only imagine. I'm getting a bit goosey as you're telling me the story, because that's
just the entire industry, all of my peers, people I've respected my entire career, heroes of mine, all in that room clapping. And I think also sitting back and going, right, you know, some were probably going, great, inspiration, we're not giving you a job. Maybe not. But I felt that the love I got from that industry was just, that fueled me, and that fueled my drive. But also, I think the industry sat back and waited and watched what I did next. And you know, the love and support I've had from my industry is just incredible. I just can't thank them enough. Everyone has been phenomenal and given me a shot and given me a chance. Some were distant. Some didn't know what to do. But you can find that everywhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't lose any friends, no colleagues. And I think it took people to wrap their heads around, time for people to wrap their heads around it as well. Of, you know, what is she going to sound like on the air? You know, what is this person? Who's this? I know my friends went through a period of mourning until they wrapped their heads around it. Even if they'd known about it for a long time, you know, they've now got this, you know, what they see as a different person. And I'm not a different person. I might look a little bit different, but, you know, and my emotions are a lot calmer. But, you know, my values are exactly the same. Treat people the way you like to be treated.
Yeah.
Have respect for others. And you know, just don't be a bad person.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in do's you would be done by.
Absolutely.
That's my catchword. And I think you are very much the person that you were when you were born. You've got the same outlook into
Massively.
You wanted the same passion, the same. You are the same person. You've grown into yourself. That's the only way to put it in my mind.
And do you know what? You're not the same as you were when you were 16. I'm not the same as I was when I was 16. You know, when we're 80 years old, we're not going to be the same as we are today.
Absolutely.
We all evolve and we all change. And
Absolutely.
that is what is so wonderful and beautiful about the human race.
Absolutely. What a fantastic point to say. Thank you very much, Stephanie. I think it's been a long discussion, but I've been wrapped with everything you've been saying. It's been fabulous. We've learned more. We've learned more about how a career can face jeopardy but be overcome through strength of thought and strength of determination and good people around you. And I'm still sort of geeking out about that, the early days listening to the radio, but where it can lead to. For you, that's been and it continues to be a very successful career. So just before we finish, just let our audience know what's on the horizon for you. What are the things that are up and coming?
I would. I love radio as we've learned. I've always been a big believer in not putting all your eggs in one basket, and I've had this incredibly wonderful career. And the industry, our industry within radio, has consolidated and changed over the years. There's more radio stations, but there's less opportunities to get into the industry. You've got to be a stronger caliber of candidate to actually, rise to the top in this industry. And I feel like I've had a very good run. I've had an incredible run, and it's been amazing. But the streets are littered with out-of-work DJs and out-of-work broadcasters. You can walk down the streets and trip over them. And that's so sad, because radio stations used to be, full service from your local town, whereas maybe just one or two shows come from your local town now, and, lots come from elsewhere in the country. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The quality of programs are much higher, and you can get bigger guests on and all sorts of stuff. The industry, this happened in America many years ago. What do they say? America sneezes, we catch cold. So the industry did change. So I slowly realised that, maybe that would be good for me to probably diversify as well. I always want to do radio. I love this. I will never stop doing it until the day I die. But I have a huge passion for public speaking and inspiring people and showing people that you can achieve your dreams. And as the Believe Achieve brand starts to evolve, and I start to, more motivational stuff and all sorts of bits and pieces, I've got big dreams for Believe Achieve, because I think that is my, well, no, I don't think, I know that is my purpose. I've always done radio and I love it, and I always will do. And I never talk about my journey on the radio. Because my shows are not there for that. My shows are there for entertainment, or the person, if I'm doing speech radio, I'm interviewing them. It's not about me. It's about them. It's their story. It's not about me. But I know with Believe Achieve, I can help inspire people. So if you're listening to this and, say, for instance, you're a business or whatever, or you'd like me to come to speak, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Or you can email hello@stephaniehirst.co.uk. That's hello@stephaniehirst.co.uk. And I'd be happy to come and speak for your organisation, because I get a real drive and love and passion from doing that as I do doing a radio show.
Yeah.
It's identical. And I think I needed something. Which gave me the same satisfaction that I was doing something. I was giving something back. And if that person in the audience is, you want to make someone you feel your team needs to be inspired, or say, for instance, you want to focus on mental health or diversity and inclusion. All of this comes under the banner of what my talk is about, because I've gone through all of that kind of stuff, from believing as an early child that I wanted to be on the radio, but knowing that my gender was wrong and all sorts of stuff. It all kind of ties together in all of that. So, somebody
who writes a regular employment update that actually gets consumed by other law firms, I write quite regularly about the disputes that happen in organisations, and how many companies and businesses get that whole diversity and inclusion piece wrong, and how they need to be better informed, better educated. And that starts at the top. So
it does.
The leaders of organisations need to get on board and understand what it is that they need to be considering so that they can in turn share that with their staff and inform and educate their staff. And your message would be absolutely perfect for that. I can see that. Stephanie, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I could carry on talking to you for the rest of the day, to be honest.
Likewise.
But we're going to draw a close here. But I'd like to thank you again for the time you've given us today and your story, which is absolutely fabulous and inspirational.
Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Find out more and join our growing business community by visiting hresource.co.uk.